Hello, my name is Rachel Holst. I'm from Winnebago County. I am in the Forest Everett's 4-H Club, and my presentation is going to be on my childhood story of my disease, ITP, or idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. Has anybody heard of ITP before? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. First, I'm going to tell you about my board and about the disease. What is it? It's an autoimmune disorder. It's also a blood disorder. When you have ITP, you often have a low platelet count. What are some symptoms? Some symptoms of ITP are serious bruising, random bleeding in the brain, stomach, mouth, or nose. It affects the immune system. The immune system consists of the thymus, bone marrow, spleen, and lymph nodes. Idiopathic stands for unknown cause. Thrombocytopenic stands for abnormal platelet count, and purpura stands for bruising, bleeding, and petechiae. What are some treatments? Some treatments for ITP are immune globulin, which helps bring up the platelets, blood draws, which help monitor the platelets, and spleen removal. The first splenectomy was performed in 1913. Some reasons of a splenectomy are emergency, life at risk, or internal bleeding. Types and who gets it. There's chronic, which is the worst case and possible for returning. Acute, which is a less case and a less case for returning. When you have acute, it's often in adults, and chronic is often in children. Acute is seasonal, so it's in the winter and the fall, and chronic isn't seasonal. Any age can get ITP, male or female, adult or child. This picture represents a child who has fallen with low platelets, so she got some severe bruising on her face, some severe bruising, petechiae, the immune system, and it points to the parts, spleen removal and reasons, blood draw needles, and immune globulin. Now I'm going to tell you my story. My story began on May of 2002 when my mom was putting me to bed and realized I had a big goose egg on my forehead and many severe bruises in many rare places. The next morning, when I woke up, I had bruising around my mouth and down my sides from being carried around and from my sippy cup from the day before. Later that night, my parents then realized there was something wrong and took me to the doctor. The doctor then began doing some blood testing to see where my platelet count was. It was down to 12,000. Platelets are what clot your blood and make sure that you don't bleed out badly. Petechiae and bruising often indicate low platelet count. Whenever I had low platelets, I often got bruising and petechiae. Petechiae is the same thing as bruising, except you don't feel it like you do a bruise, and it's just many little red dots all over your body instead of like big dark blotches all over. So that's the difference. A normal platelet count consists of 150,000 to 400,000. At one time, my platelets were down to just plain 3,000. Throughout my disease, my platelets were often lower than usual. Low platelets can cause internal or external bleeding. This also caused me to get many nosebleeds. They were so severe that they lasted from before lunch till after I went to bed that night. Whenever I was being hospitalized and got a nosebleed, my doctors often said that they couldn't do anything for me. And so we just had to do the same stuff that we had to do at home. We had to put like a wet cloth on my nose and just pretty much wait until it was over. And I was hospitalized many times in Mercy in Mason City, Iowa, and in St. Mary's in Rochester, Minnesota. I was hospitalized for many weeks at a time due to low platelet count. At one time in my disease, my doctors were thinking that my disease may be leukemia. They thought that because when people have leukemia, they often have low platelets, like you do ITP. So my doctors then began studying my blood and my platelets just to see and make sure what I really had. They realized that I had ITP and not leukemia, so that was, I guess, a good thing that we learned of what it was. In one of my hospitalizations, my doctors came in and they said that they needed to perform a treatment called IVIG. After that was over, they then realized that I was very allergic to the drug. Later that night, my doctor came in and said that they needed to perform another dose. After that was over, my mom was gonna then take me for a bath and realized that I couldn't lift up my head off the pillow because that was my allergic reaction from the medicine. So my mom then told the doctors what was going on, and they raced me down for a CAT scan of my brain. Throughout my disease, I had 2 CAT scans of my brain. Because of my low platelets, it could happen at any given time. I could get a bleed in my brain even if I barely even hit my head or whatever. So that was a thing that we had to be aware of. My parents always had to monitor me very closely because of my low platelets. I could fall or hurt myself, and it could be very serious. Throughout my disease, I had to have at least 3 CBCs a day in my worst years, which were ages 3 to 8, and I had to have 3 CBCs because of my low platelets. We couldn't afford to have them drop any lower than they were. And also, a CBC is a complete blood count to monitor your platelets. I always said no running, jumping, crashing, or burning whenever my platelet count was 40,000 or below. I was only 4 at the time and knew how serious it could be if I actually did fall or hurt myself. I could get internal bleeding, external bleeding, bleeding in my brain, severe bruises, or even worse. My doctor from Mason City, which is my family doctor, he sent me up to a hematologist at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. He sent me up to the hematologist because he said that they knew more than he would and that they could do more for me than he could. A hematologist specializes in blood disorders like mine. While I stayed many nights at Rochester, Minnesota, my family and I often stayed at the Ronald McDonald House. Whenever I got a virus, my doctors realized whenever I got a virus that my platelets often dropped. This is what my doctors assume is what caused my ITP to start, is a virus attached to my platelets and then begin my disease. In one of my checkups at Rochester, Minnesota, my doctors started preparing me for splenectomy. I had to be vaccinated for chickenpox and meningitis. I also had to have many different blood draws just to make sure that my platelets were where they should be at, just in case I would need a splenectomy. That if I would need it, then they would have to be high enough for them to perform the surgery. A few appointments later, my doctors told my parents not to worry, that only 1% of kids who have ITP are needed for splenectomy. Well, I was one of them. It was December, 1 month after my 5th birthday, my spleen was taken. After that, my doctors then realized that it wasn't 100% successful because I still got a virus, or I got an illness, and my platelets still dropped. So that's how they knew. And my doctors always said that they would never take a spleen unless a kid is at least five years old. So we had to wait until December. But I was actually scheduled for February, and I happened to get sick, and so my doctor said that they couldn't wait any longer, so then they had to schedule me for December. Now any fever consisting of 100.5 degrees, an emergency room trip is made for blood cultures and IV-7. This is what we use to realize, or to figure out what my temperature is, a thermometer. And my mom, before this is all done, my mom puts Emla cream on my hand to numb the area because of how young I was. It hurt to get IV in my hand. So that was always a good thing to have around. And so my mom put that on my hand before we left for the hospital because when we got there and when I got my IV in, it was already numb instead of getting there and then having the doctors do it. So we always had that at our house. This is all done because of no spleen. I can't fight back anything bacterial because the spleen plays such a big part of the immune system. You need it because if not, then you can't fight back anything. So another thing that I have to do, because I don't have a spleen, I have to take amoxicillin twice a day, every day, for the rest of my life because I will never have a spleen again. And I will also have to do the emergency room trip because I won't have a spleen, and that's part of what you have to do. My mom searched for a wish-granting foundation for kids with rare chronic diseases like mine. She found one, and that's called the Sunshine Foundation. My wish during my whole disease was to go on a show and perform my favorite song, God Bless America, with Lee Greenwood. When my parents told Sunshine Foundation that that was my wish, they told my parents that they could not make that possible. So my family and I then decided that we would just take a trip to Disney World. We got to stay in a Disney cottage in Florida, and some other cool things we got to see. We got to go to the SeaWorld, and we got to see some like dolphin shows. And another thing we did was go to Animal Kingdom, and while we were there, we went to a Lion King show based off the Lion King movie, and that was live. And out of an audience of probably 2,000 or more people, they picked 4 kids out of the whole audience to play music on stage with them, and I was lucky enough to be one of them, so that was really cool. And yeah, that was awesome. My family and I now believe that I have gone into remission because I have gotten many different illnesses such as H1N1, stomach flu, many different fevers, and many different colds, and yet today my platelets have still not dropped. My worst years were from ages 3 to 8. In the middle of that was age 5. Age 5 was my splenectomy. When we realized that I was scheduled for splenectomy, I was very excited because I thought that I didn't have to be poked as much anymore and I wouldn't be as sick as I was before my splenectomy. Well, that wasn't the case. When I got my spleen taken out, I had to have just as many shots as before, or even more than before. Because of no spleen, they have to take even more precautions than I was before when I was really sick. So I have to have lots of different shots. And now I'm going to tell you, again, just a little bit of a recap about my presentation. It's an autoimmune disorder. It's also a blood disorder. When you have it, you often have a low platelet count. You have serious bruising. It affects the immune system. Some different treatments are immune globulin, blood draws, and spleen removal. There's chronic and acute, and any children or adults can get it, or male or female. It doesn't really matter who you are or where you live. You can still get it at any time. And so, yeah. Today I am a happy, healthy teenage girl who has lived the life of ITP and know what it's about. I am blessed to be teaching you guys about this today because before this presentation, I'm not 100% sure that not many people knew a lot about my life or about how it was up until today or my worst years, age 8. Also, I like to teach people new things, and so I like that because not many people know about this rare disease, so I think that's really cool. I also have something else to show you guys before I'm done. I have made this binder for a project at my county fair, and it's just all about this presentation pretty much. It's just like all the facts about it, and I have a spot in here like about my story, just what I presented on. And I have my 2 dog tags that I had when I was really sick, and one was a necklace and one was a bracelet, and they just told what to do if I got sick or something like that, and like what I'm allergic to, and just some numbers to contact so they knew what to do. And I have a few different pictures. I have a picture of me touring the helicopter at Mayo Clinic, and I really like that a lot because it was one of the fun days, and I didn't have to go back to my hospital room because that was the day I got out of the hospital, and I didn't have to go back to the room. I got to go in the car and go home that day, so I was really excited. And here's a picture of me playing the music at the Lion King show. And so today I'm a happy, healthy teenage girl who has lived the life of ITP and know what it's about. We now believe that I have gone into remission, however, no doctor has confirmed it. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Are there any questions? The question was what ITP stands for and what does it like represent? ITP stands for idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. Idiopathic stands for unknown cause. Thrombocytopenic stands for abnormal platelet count, and purpura stands for bruising, bleeding, and petechiae. Well, the question was, what are my plans for the future? Well, I would like to be a doctor because I just pretty much grew up in a hospital and I was just around it all the time. So I just grew up with it and I just really like that, and I just have to watch myself, and if I do get sick, then I do have to take care of it. No, it hasn't. The only thing, if I do have low platelets, I have to be careful about that, and I can't do some certain things, like I can't, run, jump, crash and burn, because if I do, then it could turn into something worse than it really is. So we just have to stay away from that kind of stuff. So that would be the only thing. Any other questions? Thank you for listening to my presentation. After this, I will put my board and my binder back there, and you can feel free to take a look at that, because I know that some of this stuff you can't really see for up close, and you can take a look at my binder and read anything that you would like to. Thank you.